Hello, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to our webinar tonight. We are going to wait just a few more minutes just to give everybody a chance to log in. And I see our participants growing, so we want to give everybody just a few minutes to get done with dinner, and then we'll get started. We're so glad you're with us tonight. Thank you so much for taking time. We know everybody's very busy. And you've probably just finished dinner, maybe sat kids down somewhere with ice cream to be busy.
That's what I did.
But like I said, we'll just give this just 1 or 2 more minutes. I see our participants growing, and we want to give everyone a chance to enter in. So thank you for being patient with us while we do this technical stuff that we do in this new world of Zoom. Wow. Okay. Okay. Gonna wait 1 more minute, and then I think we'll get started. Oh, numbers are still growing. I don't want to wait too long. But it is 7:02, and we're trying to be respectful of the time as we're going to try to complete this in the next hour. So I'm going to introduce myself. I am Brenda Siegel. I am a facilitator for the Parent Support Network, which is a part of the Youth Mental Health Project. We are very excited tonight to have another webinar in our series of Virtually Speaking, which is a webinar series where we take straight talk from parents, professional, and kids about the mental health issues that matter most to you and your family. And tonight we are very pleased to have Dr. Gillian Galen with us to talk about DBT. Now, most of us, including myself, have had both of my children go through DBT programs. Yet when somebody asks me what DBT is, I really struggle to explain it. And here we are with an expert, thank goodness, to explain it from the bottom up. She is the co-author of the book DBT for Dummies, available on Amazon, that you can get for yourself. It's a very clear-cut and wonderful way to explain what DBT is, how it works, who it's for, and how you as parents as well participate in the process. So I'm very pleased and thankful to introduce Dr. Gillian Galen to our webinar this evening. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I love DBT, so I'm really excited to talk to you guys about it and answer any questions you have. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I'm a clinical psychologist, DBT therapist. I work predominantly at McLean Hospital, where I am the program director of the 3 East DBT residential programs, and I'm also their director of training for our whole continuum. So McLean Hospital has a series of, it's really a continuum of care that provides DBT. So we have a girls residential, a boys residential, a partial hospital program, an outpatient clinic, and a transitional living for girls 18 to 24. So all of these are fully adherent DBT all the time programs. When you sort of talk about our continuum, it seems sort of binary. We have like the girls program and the boys program, but we also serve non-binary youth and transgender youth and try to help them find the spot within our care that they feel the most affirmed and comfortable in. All of our programs are self-pay. That is one of the sort of biggest, I think, challenges of DBT programs. And our residentials require a minimum of a six-week stay, and our partial hospital is a minimum of a 4-week stay. So we're really trying to provide almost like what you would get in a year of outpatient DBT in about 4 to 6 weeks. So you can kind of think about it as an immersion program. I also have a particular interest in working with parents. So I do a lot of, I run the Parent Skills group through 3 East. I have an outpatient practice where I work with a lot of parents on individual skills training and support and coaching. So that's me.
And can you tell us where McLean is located, please?
Sure. Yep. So McLean is it's the main campus of McLean is in Belmont, Massachusetts. Actually, we're a little bit of a satellite campus. They've moved us to Arlington, Massachusetts, which is about 3.5 miles down the road. We are part of Harvard, the Harvard system. So we're the Mass General Hospital Psychiatric Hospital, and part of Harvard Medical School.
Great, thank you. That gives just, I'm sure we have people from all over the country watching us, and I just wanted to give them a little bit of knowledge about where you're located and where they could contact you if they need to. So I think we're going to go ahead and put up our PowerPoint, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Galen and have her start the evening. We will have her go through her presentation, and then also please note that there is a Q&A available. If you have questions, please feel free to put them in the question and answer spot on your screen, and we will do our best to get through them in the hour that we have. If it's okay if your question gets answered during the course of the conversation, we might skip over it. So please understand that, and we will do our best to get through it. So I'm going to turn it over and take it away.
Great. All right. So I'm going to actually try to give you a pretty comprehensive overview of DBT and leave lots of time for questions. So DBT stands for Dialectical Behavioral Therapy. It was developed in the 1970s, really rolled out in the early 1980s by Dr. Marshall Linehan, who we learned much later, like about 10 years ago, where actually she disclosed to everyone at the Institute of Living that she actually had borderline personality disorder and had been a patient there for many years. So interestingly, she had given their grand rounds and had been recognized for her work at the Institute of Living, never telling anyone that she had been a patient there actually for quite some time. So if you're interested, there's a wonderful New York Times article where you can Google it and read sort of the article of her sharing with everyone. And actually a whole bunch of us at 3 East got to be there, which was really a pretty cool thing. So what DBT actually came from was her very strong commitment when she was sort of at the depths of her despair, that she was going to, what she described as help people get out of hell. And she was this was gonna be her sort of her life's journey, was to figure out how to treat people. And what she meant was predominantly women who had chronic suicidality and self-injury and were getting stuck, what she called in the revolving doors of psychiatric hospitals. So not getting better, just being discharged and admitted over and over again. So she really sort of found her footing and committed herself to this study, got her doctorate, and became a very fierce evidence-based practitioner. So she decided that she was going to make studying borderline personality disorder her life's work and try to figure out what to do. So the first treatment she tried and studied was a study using cognitive behavioral therapy, which made sense because that was really the up and coming third wave treatment. And what was interesting about cognitive behavioral therapy is that people got worse. They got more suicidal because they felt like what the treatment was doing was focusing too much on change your thinking, change how you feel, change your behavior. And it didn't, the people that she was working with didn't feel like it recognized their suffering, just said, solve the problem, here's how you do it. And so they got more suicidal and self-destructive. So then she actually swung all the way to the other side, and she did a study and an intervention using mindfulness-based treatment. She had her own Zen practice, and they got worse, okay? And they got worse because she had taken a very acceptance-based treatment, and their response was, I'm simply supposed to accept like the misery that I am in. You're not gonna help me. So she sort of accidentally came across this idea of dialectics. Somebody that she was working with, husband, was studying dialectics. And the study of dialectics is the idea that two opposing truths can be valid at the same time. Okay, so two opposing things can be valid at the same time. And so she thought about this. And so what she decided to do was actually take cognitive behavioral therapy, which is change focused, and synthesize it with a mindfulness-based therapy, which is acceptance focused. And there you have your you have your foundational dialectic of DBT, right? We are both accepting where you are and at the same time pushing for change. Okay, so there are your two opposing concepts, acceptance and change. And that's where DBT was born. So it's an evidence-based treatment. It is the gold standard treatment for treating borderline personality disorder, for treating self-injury, and for treating suicide. It is also treated for mood disorders, eating disorders, PTSD, and substance use disorders. And it now spans the ages. So initially it was developed for adults, then Alec Miller and Jill Rathis modified it for adolescents. And then much more recently, in the last 5 to 7 years, they are developing what's called DBT-C, which is DBT for children. So much younger, sort of early, maybe that like tween, kind of the tween area. They've also done some work modifying it for people that have developmental disabilities. So there's lots of work on expanding it. And what DBT, so it's a skills-based treatment. It's interesting because it is an evidence-based treatment. It has a manual, but it's a principle-based treatment, right? So some of the cognitive behavioral treatments work on a manual. They tell you so what you do on session 1, 2, and 3. DBT actually demands that the treaters understand a set of principles, and we work on principles, and we have a skills manual. Okay, and it works on what's called a skills deficit model. So what we believe in DBT is that for whatever reason, people that come to DBT missed out on some skills. They have skills deficits that they just didn't acquire certain skills that maybe, typically most of us would acquire. And so we simply teach them the skills, which makes them more effective in their life. All right, can you go to the next slide? So there's 4 modules of DBT. The core skill of DBT is mindfulness. And we work on, and lots of people kind of roll their eyes at mindfulness, but we really think about mindfulness as a practice in attention. Is that what we know is that strong emotions hijack our attention, and it makes it very, very hard to think about other things. So we teach the skill of mindfulness so that we can gain control and awareness of our attention, that we can learn how to move our mind from focusing on one thing to focusing on another, and that we can learn to be more present and less judgmental, and certainly less reactive. So we teach mindfulness skills as their own module, and then you'll also see mindfulness skills really interwoven in all of the other modules. So the other modules are emotion regulation, distress tolerance, and interpersonal effectiveness. And if you are an adolescent and with a family coming to DBT, you get a bonus module, which is called the middle path, where we teach things like the principles of behavior, like what reinforces different behaviors. And we talk about some very specific parenting dialectics where parents and kids tend to get stuck. Go to the next slide. The treatment model. So DBT is a very intensive treatment. So this is, that requires a very significant commitment, both from the adolescent that's coming to us, or certainly an adult, if that's who comes to the treatment, as well as their families. So this is not the therapy where you walk in and you have your you talk about what's going on and then you leave. So you go to individual therapy. You're required to complete a diary card, which tracks what we call your target behaviors, the behaviors that we want to increase or decrease. That has to be completed every day. You have an individual therapist who provides skills coaching, which is intersession contact. So part of what we believe in DBT is that we need to learn skills and how to practice them in all relevant contexts. So when my individual patients are, out in the world and they get stuck, my requirement is that they try one skill on their own, and if that skill doesn't work, that they give me a call and I will coach them through. So I'm not providing therapy, I'm really providing coaching. Here's what I tried. I usually say, what's going on? They usually will tell me. I will usually validate whatever emotions are there. And then I will say, okay, let's try this. And the agreement is that if you're going to call me, you're going to not engage in any problematic behaviors until I call you back if I don't answer. And that we have an agreement that we're going to come up with a plan together and that you're going to follow through. Next, there's a skills training group. So you have to go, if you go once a week to individual therapy, you also attend a 90-minute DBT skills training group, or you may attend a multi-family skills group where the whole where families go together, the kids and their parents, and they learn the skills. And then your therapist must be on what's called a consultation team, which is a weekly meeting of DBT therapists, tends to be a small meeting in which we get consultation from one another. We make sure that we're staying on model. And it's a really important place for DBT therapists to make sure that they're not burned out. The average lifespan of a DBT therapist is about 3 years. Because there's lots of acuity, lots of suicidality, lots of intercession contact. And so you want to have a strong team so that it supports you not getting burned out. And if you're, and what's really important about these are the questions. If you're looking for a real DBT therapist or an adherent DBT therapist to treat your child on model, these are the questions that you want to ask. There's a lot of people out there that say they do DBT, and they're not actually doing the full treatment model. And for some people, doing what's called DBT light is fine. But if you're really looking for adherent DBT, you have to make sure that these things are in place. Okay, go to the next one. Okay, so I pulled out, there's lots of kind of important things in a crash course to DBT to share, but these, I think, this is one of my favorite parts about DBT. So what DBT asks of people is that they adhere to these assumptions. And we understand that by nature, right, assumptions aren't things to be proven. They're things to simply abide by, okay? And these, to me, are one of the things that make DBT such an incredible treatment, is that this is how DBT therapists, and then the parents that I work with, this is what I ask all parents to also believe about themselves and their child. And I think these are the things that actually help people be less reactive, right? And you're going to see some really interesting dialectics in these assumptions, okay? So the first one, and usually the one that can be the hardest to hold, is this idea that patients and families are doing the best that they can. And this is in any given moment, okay? So that means in our worst moment, it was the best that we could do, okay? And the idea is that it was the best that we could do given all of the circumstances that surround that moment, right? So the day that I sleep, 3 hours because my children have woken me up throughout the night, right? How I perform, right? How I tolerate distress, maybe how I manage my judgments, how I navigate a difficult situation is going to be really different than on a day that I had a great night's sleep, right? So it's this idea that we stay out of this judgment and we just believe that at any given moment, people are doing the best they can. Now, at the same time, we also believe that people need to do better, try harder, and be more motivated to change, okay? So there is your foundational dialectic right there, right? That you are at the same time doing the best that you can, and we've got to do better, right? We believe that everybody wants to improve. So one of the common pitfalls for people that come to DBT, they're often exhausted and terrified and have tried many, many different things to help their child, is that it's easy to fall into this belief that maybe kids don't want to get better. Like they don't want to get better. They're taking the easy way out by being in a hospital. They don't want to do anything, right? They're taking the easy way out and they don't want to improve. And once we head down that road as either a family member or a clinician, we get in trouble, right? Because we start to lose compassion, we start to not being able to see the whole picture. So we just say that, you know what, fundamentally, all of us want to improve, you know? So we believe that patients and families must learn all new behaviors in all relevant contexts. So DBT is not looking for the perfect patient. We are looking for it to be tricky and challenging, and know that, like, you know, once I learn the skills, I now have to generalize them to my family, to my parents, to my siblings, to my peers, to my girlfriend, to my boyfriend, to my job, to school, to my sports team, you know, and this is why skills coaching exists, because we recognize that for most people coming to DBT, learning the skills is not the problem. It's actually learning to apply them when you're dysregulated, and then in all different contexts, okay? DBT believes that patients and families cannot fail DBT. So this is different. We often, certainly at 3 East, will get a lot of referrals that will have somewhere in the referral packet that they like failed CBT or they failed some sort of treatment. We actually believe that if people are doing the whole treatment and it doesn't work, then DBT fails the patient, not the patient failing DBT. It's an interesting thing because that only happens in the world of mental health, that we blame patients for treatments not working. We don't blame them nobody says like that, like you failed your chemotherapy, right? Or you failed something, you know, you failed a procedure. So we make it very explicit that we also believe that people don't fail DBT, that the treatment fails them. We believe that patients and families may not have caused all of their problems, but they have to solve them anyways. Okay, this is sometimes an unpopular one with adolescents, but it's a really important one because we recognize that lots of unfair things happen to people, and that many, many people lose many years, decades of their life feeling like it wasn't their fault, and so that they shouldn't have to solve the problem. And we would say that we agree that it's not your fault and you have to solve it, and we'll help you. Okay? And then, you know, Marsha always puts in that the lives of suicidal individuals with BPD are unbearable as they are currently being lived. And that keeps us compassionate and non-judgmental. So you want to go to the next slide? All right, so there was an effort to try to find someone that would come talk with me who has done DBT, and we didn't do that. So I asked one of my very long-time patients, I said, you know, can you write something? She was actually busy tonight. Can you write something about describing the role that DBT has played in your life? So we met at 3 East. I was her assigned therapist at 3 East, and we actually just celebrated our 10-year anniversary, or she calls it a therabursary, last Friday. And it's not that we've been doing, you know, we're really in a much later stage of DBT, and it doesn't look at all the same as it did years ago, and our things that we're working on are really different. But I want to read you what she wrote. So she said, I went into DBT at age 17 on an extremely reluctant pseudo-voluntary basis. This is totally accurate. My school was requiring that I completed a program following increased self-injury, suicidal ideation, problems with mood, and conflict at home, and basically a life of unrelenting crisis. Once I got past the fact that I had to be there, the intensive groups were engaging, though at times incredibly emotionally challenging, but it mostly didn't feel like a punishment. The acronyms felt kind of immature, but they were intuitive enough that I carried the skills through the last 10 years since graduating my DBT program and working in individual DBT. I still use skills from each module. I still can break down behaviors as you might in a chain analysis, and I credit DBT with teaching me how to take a step back and breathe and think before doing behaviors. And I do still struggle. DBT is not a magic cure, but you get out of it what you put into it. DBT skills, while they may seem like common sense, have filled in for the common sense that I was missing on my own. And they have honestly made me a better person. My behaviors no longer manipulate my relationships, land me in ERs for stitches, eating disorder programs, and inpatient psych units. And most importantly, they don't dictate how far I can go in life. I'm officially a few years out of my last self-harm episode. I don't keep count of the days anymore, and I can't even remember when I stopped counting. So this has been a very, very, very long road, a long road for her, and she will be now at age 27. She will be graduating college in March. So just a couple DBT resources for you. So the ones on the left, so the DBT Skills Training Manual, that's Marsha Linehan's manual. That's the adult manual, the second edition. There's a red and black one that was the one before that. The ones in the middle two are the adolescent skills module, skills manual and workbook. And those are that's also the second edition. And then the red one is actually Marsha Linehan's new memoir, which came out a couple of years ago, if you're interested in sort of reading about her. And then Shameless Self-Promotion is the DBT for Dummies book on the end. So,
Wow.
so that is your crash course in DBT. And now hopefully you have an opportunity to ask some questions that I can provide some maybe clarification or anything that's you guys want to know.
Wow. Thank you for that.
Sure.
And my head is, there's so much work that we do in the Parent Support Network, which are meetings where we work as facilitators. All the facilitators in Parent Support Network are parents of children with mental health issues. And we work at doing peer-to-peer support with other parents who are struggling. And we don't ask for diagnoses. We don't ask, if you have a concern about your child, people come, and dysregulation comes up all the time. I didn't know it was called dysregulation when it was my own children. I just used to call it was a disproportionate response to what was happening. And
that's a great behavioral definition.
I was like, this is disproportionate. What do we do with it? I was reading through the book and something really jumped out at me, and I'd love for you to just touch on it before we start with the questions that I see in the question and answer section. And I encourage you to please put your questions in there while we're chatting just a bit. But you talked about primary emotions and secondary emotions, and that the primary emotions are when we think of emotions, happiness, sadness, joy, fear, those are what we think of, but it's what comes behind the secondary emotions where we or our children get stuck. Can you explain a little bit about that? Because I think it really does apply to so many of us that are struggling with our children when they get stuck in these places.
Absolutely. So the first thing, I love that there's the parent peer-to-peer support, because as somebody that I'm very passionate about working with parents, kids do better when parents have support and skills, and parents' relationships with their partners do better when they have skills. So I love it. I'm in full support of it.
Thank you.
Yes. So I love primary and secondary. This is like you're getting like a DBT geek right here. Okay, so primary and secondary emotions. So primary, I'm going to start a little bit with the definition. You had a great start. So you can think about primary emotions as like almost like neurological events, right? So there's some sort of stimuli. It could be something that you think about. It could be something you see, you hear, you smell, right? It goes into your brain, takes it in, and then your limbic system, which is the emotional center of your brain, produces an emotion, right? And there's kind of nothing you can do about it, right? So you can't really help what comes out of there. And those, there's lots of debate about how many primary emotions there are, right? So Marsha Linehan has 10 or 11. Some people have 5. Some people have 7. I'm not sure it really matters. In DBT, let's see if I can do them. We have sadness, joy, fear, guilt, shame, jealousy, envy, anger, disgust, surprise, and love. There's some debate about love and surprise. They kind of pop in and off of the list, but I like to have them on the list. So those are just things that happen, right? So though what's fascinating about primary emotions is that if you do nothing about them, right? So if you know mindfulness or DBT, we would say you use the observe and the describe skills. You just notice, describe it non-judgmentally. They last no more than 60 seconds before something else is required to prompt the emotion, right? That runs, it looks like a nice little bell curve. It peaks like a wave, right? And then it goes down. Unfortunately, and this is how like we begin our life living in primary emotions. So if you have kids that are under, it's interesting, my 3-year-old just transitioned out of it. It's so sad, but and you know, at 0 to 3, they live in a primary emotion, right? Because they have no capacity to think about the emotions. They just have the emotion. So we think that they're really, they're sad, and then they're happy, and then they're content, and then they're mad. And they seem to sort of like get over it reasonably quickly. And then they get to like 3.5 or 4, and their brain develops, their frontal lobe begins to develop, and they begin to have the capacity to think about their emotional experience, right? And this is where it all goes downhill, because that is what a secondary emotion is. So a secondary emotion is what happens when we think about a primary emotion, right? So what's interesting is that actually anything that's primary can be secondary, right? So I can feel sad, and then I can start thinking about how I'm always sad, and how I'm never going to be happy, and how hard my life is, and what the point is. And I can go on and on and on, and inadvertently perpetuate my sadness simply by thinking about it, right? So if anybody is a ruminator, most people, or anybody gets stuck laying in bed at night thinking and thinking and thinking, you are getting caught in a secondary emotion. So if your emotions are lasting, and the kids' emotions, right, are lasting longer than like a minute, it's usually because it's a secondary emotion, because we're thinking about it. Now you can create secondary emotions. And again, it's not like I say it as if you're creating it. This is going on mostly out of people's awareness until you learn mindfulness and you start to pay attention and you can catch it, right? So I could have that sadness example where I get really stuck in my sadness. Then it gets to like misery. The hole gets deep, and you need a much bigger shovel and ladder to get out of it. But there are other emotions in which you may start with a primary emotion of being sad, and then you may get very angry, right? And some of this has to do with like our own family culture, right? So there's family cultures in which anger isn't tolerated, so you just never see it. But it's not that it's not there, right? It's just that it gets covered up with a secondary emotion, right? Or that people get really anxious about things, and it's really not so much about fear, it's about shame, but what you see is anxiety, right? Or like I can tell you a very common, so as a program director, one of my jobs is to field the complaints of the parents when they don't like things, right? I get lots of that. And I can't tell you the number of parents that I meet with that they come to me and they're really, angry or worried or, whatever it is. And they just are so angry. And what I realize is they're actually not angry, they're terrified, right? They're terrified because their kid is not getting better fast enough, or is not as engaged in the program as they wish they would be. And really they're terrified, right? But what they led with was anger, right? So what I see is the secondary emotion. But then because I know what to look for, the minute I say something like, you must be really terrified, then you start to help people get back into that primary emotion, right? So, and this happens all the time. An interesting thing about anger is that as we get older, anger is rarely a primary emotion. It's almost always secondary, right? So you can, road rage is like a great example. Usually like when people are driving and they get cut off and they get really like angry and they start screaming and whatever, they're terrified, right? You're usually like, you're very shaken. Someone almost hit your car, or they walked in front of your car and you almost hit them, or, one of those things. And you move so quickly from the fear right into the anger. But it's not about the anger, it's about the fear. So if you have a kid that you think is often in a secondary emotion, it makes what we call validation very tricky. And that your kid, so if you're a practiced validator, and if you're not, I would encourage you to learn all about validation, because it is such a wonderful skill and really brings people together and increases communication. If you ever have validated your kid because you see an emotion and they start to say things like, no, it's more complicated like that, or I don't think you really get it. That may be a great clue that you're validating what you're seeing, but what you're seeing is a secondary emotion instead of a primary emotion.
That is such a great explanation. And I think I'm just going to encapsulate that just a bit and say, and you wrapped it up beautifully, just to say that so often just the act of validating, right? I mean, so often as parents, we get into this combative cycle. And I think it's so hard to stay calm and say, I see that you feel like this right now, and then work from that point. And I thank you so much for explaining that, because actually, as you were explaining it, different people were popping in my mind, thinking about people that ruminate and people that, get up in the middle of the night, that it's not the things that you're thinking about necessarily. It's not that emotion, but it's coming from a different place. And thank you so much.
Yeah.
I do want to turn, we do have some questions, and I'm trying to take the questions and find commonality in the questions. There were a couple of different people asked about DBT work with kids and adolescents on the spectrum, and how does that work versus neurotypical versus neurodivergent. And can you speak a little bit about how DBT is applied, and would it work for a child or adolescent on the spectrum?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I think it's certainly one that is bopping around the DBT world a lot. Because the spectrum is a spectrum, I think if you're deeper on the spectrum, DBT is not a great. There's too many nuances in it. But there's actually lots of people on the spectrum, certainly people that used to be identified as Asperger's, that actually really do benefit from DBT. They tend to take from it the more concrete aspects of it. So it's a great opportunity for distress tolerance skills, for those mindfulness skills. What it lacks in is it's not a substitute for social pragmatics. So the interpersonal effectiveness skills are great. There's 3 main skills, and actually those skills do require a level of sort of social understanding. So you can sort of get the kids to learn those skills, but they need often extra help. Which, if you get, there are actually DBT therapists that specialize in DBT with kids on the spectrum. And so what they've done is they add some things to support the social pragmatics piece that DBT probably doesn't have quite enough of for kids that are on the spectrum. But it is great. They benefit from mindfulness. They benefit from that learning the distress tolerance, from acceptance. But they need something else. It's not going to replace a social pragmatics type treatment.
And I would offer, as a mother of a child on the spectrum with Asperger's, that just the rules part of it, the part that there are assumptions that you are accepting as rules, and that there's a manual, and would actually be beneficial to somebody with high functioning autism or Asperger's. But yes, I appreciate that the DBT world is looking to incorporate some of that, the social skills part of that, because it does make it just a little more challenging. But thank you for answering that question. Sure. I do also have a number of questions about, and you talked about a little bit about being a self-pay. The program that you work with is a self-pay program. And our questions are asking about, how do you find a program that takes insurance, or what tools are out there? I get maybe search engines, that type of thing. Where would somebody go to find out about DBT programs, and how to find out if they're covered by insurance? Is that something that you can speak to?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question. I wish I had here's the place where you can kind of find them. There are very few DBT residentials that exist. There are, increasingly more residential treatment centers that are doing DBT that would be funded by school systems if you qualified for an out-of-district placement.
Okay.
That would be then funded by the school. There are not very many DBT residential programs that I really know of. I mean, 3 East is one for kids. Silver Hill has a DBT program that used to be partially covered by insurance, but I'm not really sure if it is anymore. My guess is that there are some partial programs. I think it's really like sort of Googling in your area DBT programs and then looking into them. But it's a huge problem, and it's something that the DBT world is trying to figure out. But a lot of DBT treatment really isn't recognized by insurance companies. So many of the kids that come to DBT treatment are kind of deemed as chronic by the insurance companies. And so for us to say, well, they've been in the hospital, they've had 7 hospitalizations in the last 18 months. Therefore, you should pay for a program that is 6 weeks. They say, no, they're chronic. And you kind of run into this problem. So, some insurance companies will work with you to do single case agreements in certain programs. If you have a child that has tried other programs and things aren't working, you can be creative. Some places have scholarship programs or sliding scales, but it's a huge problem. Like, it's just a huge problem.
Thank you. And thank you for recognizing that. It is definitely an issue as those of us know who have gone through it, trying to find treatment for our own children. Most of us know that so many mental health professionals are considered out of network. If they're in network at this point after a pandemic with so many mental health issues, it's even hard to find therapists to meet with. So thank you for addressing that. Let's see, how is DBT principally different than ACT, which is acceptance and commitment therapy?
Oh, I just saw it in the chat. That's great. I wasn't sure that Rogers was taking insurance now. That's great. So Rogers is a residential DBT program in the Midwest.
Oh, great.
That takes some insurances, probably. That's great to know, because they did not always. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for adding that.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah, so ACT is a great treatment. It's totally different. So DBT is a combination of cognitive behavioral therapy and mindfulness-based therapy. ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, is much more on the mindfulness and acceptance world. They do a lot of ACT and OCD treatment. It's actually a nice complement. There's some great work around ACT and body dysmorphia. But it's really focusing much more on sort of accepting what's there and learning to live with it, which is great. Certainly when you have certain kinds of thoughts. DBT is using acceptance, but we're also, we're fundamentally a change-based treatment. And DBT, we just get to change by toggling between acceptance and change.
Okay, that's helpful. And I hope that would be helpful for parents as they're searching for programs. Our school teaches DBT Skills A. Distress tolerance skills are of such value. Are you seeing many schools teaching Skills A? And can you explain what DBT Skills A means?
Usually it's DBT A is DBT for adolescents.
Oh, okay. So
it's either DBT for adolescents, or like on us, we use DBT A as DBT advanced. There certainly, like in New York, Alec Miller's done a lot of work with schools to get the DBT skills into it. I firmly believe if we started teaching DBT skills in elementary school, we would catch a lot of the deficits. So we would be teaching kids these, just, if they're not picking them up on their own, we'll teach them, and then they will have them by adolescence. And it would be, a great asset. I think not enough schools are doing it. I can tell you we have a lot of graduates from our program that go back to their schools, and they do presentations, and they present to the school like health committee, and they try to get DBT taught in like health classes. And, you know, I think they're missing out on something, because I think if you're starting to teach the stress tolerance skills, which are, it's a split module of skills of crisis survival skills. Like, what are those things that just get you through the moment? They don't solve the problem, but they get you through the moment without making things worse. And accepting reality skills. You know, if you're starting to teach those skills, if you're teaching emotion regulation skills, identifying emotions, you know, kids are going to be in much better shape, and it's not going to hurt the kids that already know those things to build their toolbox even more.
Right.
So that's awesome that they're teaching it in your schools. I mean, they don't teach them in my kids' schools. But
well, it also, you know, we speak about the kids who might already have those skills, but further enhances the importance and tolerance for those who are still learning it. We have a question from one of our watchers, attendees, I guess we would call them, would be a better way, saying that this was fantastic. Her daughter is 16 and was recently referred to a DBT center. And you spoke to this just a little bit, saying that she's been through so many therapists that she's not really motivated from within to do another program. You know, I think, I would imagine that when so many families come to you, they are just exhausted, right? They're exhausted. They're in crisis. They just want to save their children, help their children to become functioning children who will eventually become functioning adults, which is all of our goals. How do you know if your child can benefit from DBT? And how do you know when it's time to turn to DBT?
yeah, so built into DBT is a fair, so the beginning of DBT is often called pre-treatment. It's a couple first, 4 to 6 sessions in an outpatient world. In a residential, it's a little bit different. And we sort of try hard to sell the treatment to the kids. Like, here's what I can help you with. You tell me what your long-term goal is. What do you want to do? It could be really far, here's a long-term one, here's a medium, here's a short-term. Let me help you figure out what are you doing in your life that's getting in the way of your goals. And then let me show you how I think this treatment can help. So there's a built-in sort of motivational piece to it. But if it's truly one of those treatments that it's exactly what Kim had said. It was funny that she even said it that way, because she didn't always put in so much for a couple of years there. What you put in is what you get out of this treatment. And it's a very demanding treatment. And I do think one of the blind spots to people is that, like, when kids, we want them to do it because we think that it's going to help them. And we're probably right that it's going to help them. But if they don't see the wisdom in doing this treatment, it's usually it doesn't work and causes a fair amount of conflict, and often can turn them off to it when they actually are ready to do it. So we often will see people, and sometimes we just can't get the kids motivated to do this. And we might just say, maybe not now, or maybe not in the dose maybe the residential dose is too big a dose of DBT. Maybe it needs to be, in an outpatient, or maybe to try something else. What we usually try to tell the kids is, we would like to at least tell you what you're saying no to. Let me just orient you to, just so you know what you're saying no to, so that if you change your mind. But it is one of those treatments that it just doesn't work if they don't have to be happy about it. Like we have a lot of kids where we talk about, they get to us because it's freedom to choose with absence of alternatives that they like, so they choose us instead of the wilderness, or something like that. But we still make it really clear that in order to do DBT, like, you have to have some goals. They don't have to be huge, and you can be really depressed and find it really, really hard to think about something. But we have to have something that we're working towards, because it's too hard and too demanding of a treatment to not have that. So it's a very tough space, and I've sat with a lot of really devastated parents when the kids just couldn't see the wisdom in it.
Wow, that's a tough space. I'm thinking about tough spaces that some of the parents I work with are in. Is
Yeah.
it's you know, we all know, I'll just take the, you know, nobody's going to be able to help themselves if they don't buy into the program, but it's
Yeah.
so hard to get our children to understand that the program is there, and if they work it, they can feel better, that the possibility
Yeah.
is out there to feel better.
And I often will tell parents, you know, that if your kid won't do DBT, it doesn't mean you can't do DBT. So find, you know, so like in I have a couple parents. I run 2 outpatient parent skills and support groups in an outpatient practice that I have. Your kid doesn't have to be in it, or sign up for the national, maybe this can go up in the chat. I'll try to, the National Education Alliance for Borderline Personality Disorder, which is NEABPD.com. They have an unbelievable family program called Family Connections, and it's parents teaching parents the skills. It's free. It's offered now almost all the way around the world. There's probably a terrible wait list right now, but I would get on it. And you learn the DBT skills.
That's great.
So, you know, they spend a lot of time on validation, but it's a great organization. So it's a nice resource, and I'll send parents there and say, you know, if your kids aren't going to do it, you can still do it. You can learn validation. You can learn behavioral principles. You can learn those things, and it can help.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you. What can parents do to support kids who have suicidal ideation, self-harm tendencies, and are triggered by the pressure that a lot of kids put on themselves? Getting a B instead of an A, the peer pressure around academic excellence. I mean, not obviously, we know that there's something deeper going on, and those are the triggers that are triggering the self-harm thoughts. But what would you say to parents that are trying to support and trying to, I guess, move kids into another direction?
Yeah, so this is hard, because I've never met a parent that got their kid to stop self-injuring, even though it's, you know, they tried their absolute hardest. This is a problem that the kids have to solve. So I think one of the things to think about, and if you have a kid that's self-injuring and you want more information, there's a great book by Michael Hollander. He was actually one of the founders of 3 East, called Cutting, or Helping Teens That Cut, I think. Helping Teens That Cut. It's a great book with a great resource. But I think, you know, the first thing to remember about self-injury is that we often, as parents and providers, feel like self-injury is a problem, but for the kids, self-injury is a solution. Mm-hmm. It is solving a problem. And I think our job as parents is to get really, really curious with the kids around that problem. Now, it's tricky because lots of kids won't talk to you about their self-injury, or they're worried it'll make you worried, or they hide their self-injury and they cut and play, you know. And so it's really about validation and about curiosity, you know, and I think, you know, heading them towards DBT as best as you can, because that is the gold standard treatment for self-injury. But I think one of the hardest things for parents around self-injury is you can't get them to stop. You can't, there's, you know, you can't hide every sharp thing in your house. And when you do, they use their fingernails, mm-hmm. you know, or they take the staple out of the packet that they got from school. So I think the first thing is to just really to slow down, to start to do a lot of validation, to get really curious about what's going on, and see if they'll start talking to you. See if they'll start sort of and at which point then you can start talking about what kind of help, you know, they might want. But I think kids will start talking when their parents recognize that there's more to self-injury than it just being a problem.
That's so interesting, because I think what happens is that when we pick up self-injury behaviors, when we notice it, and as parents, I think a lot of people think, well, then my child must be suicidal. And they connect cutting with suicidal ideation, which I know now are different. And that, like you said, cutting is a release. It's an emotional release for anybody who's doing it. I keep using children, but children, adolescents, adults who cut, it's an emotional release. It's not necessarily suicidal ideation, but the underlying problems need to be addressed.
Yeah, so the majority, the wide majority of people that self-injure do it for what we call affect regulation. They're either using it to down-regulate, to like calm down because I'm so worked up about, I'm so angry or anxious or whatever the emotion, they want to re-regulate by self-injuring, or they want to up-regulate because they're numbed out and they feel nothing. So that's the majority of people that self-injure. About 2% of kids will self-injure as a communication of distress because they don't have the ability to articulate how they're feeling or their distress. And so they self-injure and then kind of will maybe show it or make it obvious so that people can understand it. Another small percentage of it will do it for self-punishment. But the majority of people are self-injuring to regulate as an emotion regulation skill. The link it has to suicide is that if you are somebody that self-injures, you are 300% more likely to make a suicide attempt. And they think, they're not sure, but they think that there's some sort of priming in the brain that might be happening. So why self-injury is up at a top priority of a treatment target in DBT, we do it together, is not because self-injury is suicidal. It's because it makes you more at risk to making a suicide attempt over time. So people that self-injure are more likely to make suicide attempts.
Okay, that's actually a really important distinction. Thank you for making that. We are getting very close to the end of our hour together, and I'm scanning the questions because I want to try to get one more question in if I can. You noted the light version. Can parents, teachers, clergy choose some of these skills to integrate into daily life? Which of these skills are the most important to pick up? I think you may have spoken to it already, but I'll let you answer the question.
Yeah, so there was a great study that actually had great efficacy of just teaching, like pulling out the DBT skills and just teaching the DBT skills. So absolutely, get them in however you want. Validation. So your big one is going to be in DBT language. It's going to be your give skill, GIVE skill, which would be learning how to validate other people and yourself, making sense of your own emotional experience. I think that would be one. I think radical acceptance, which lives in distress tolerance, which is radically accepting what is right now, I think is a great one. Understanding primary and secondary emotions. Probably in emotion regulation, opposite action. So feeling an emotion and an urge that is not helpful, like I'm really anxious and my urge is to stay in bed all day. And then we say we need to act opposite 110%. So I need to get out of bed, get dressed, get showered, call a friend and go do something. I think that's another really great skill. And then any of the distress tolerance, crisis survival skills are great. And what we often say is put together a comfort box or a crisis kit. So you don't have to think about it in the moment, but you can grab some distracting activities or some imagery so that you have a little toolbox, understanding that that's not going to solve any problems, but it's going to get you through the moment to the other side so that you can think. And then of course, everyone should learn mindfulness. I'm biased.
Yes.
So.
Wow, what an informative hour this has been. We've crammed a lot in. I just want to ask you, is there anything in the final minute that we have here that you would like to say about DBT or about us accessing DBT information? I'm going to hold up the book one more time in our...
You can access a lot of books, yeah. I guess what I would say is that everyone should really hold tight to that assumption that you're doing the best that you can, and that we can always do better. But in those moments, we're doing the best that we can. So to stay steady, to stay non-judgmental, and self-compassionate, because it's an easier way to live this really hard journey.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Be kind to yourself, parents. Be kind to yourself. And if you are looking for a peer-to-peer support group, please look on Support Group Central for all of the Youth Mental Health Project virtual support groups. Dr. Galen, thank you again for joining us for this informative hour. All of you will be sent a copy of this recording so you can refer back to it. And we hope to see you again in future webinars. Thank you and good night.
Thank you. Good night.